Right now, um, Azerbaijan's banking servers are basically working overtime. I mean,
Yeah.
they are processing just record-breaking volumes of global wealth, handling this unprecedented surge in transactions.
Yeah, it's a massive influx.
Exactly. Geopolitically, the country is suddenly, the center of the world. It's dominating international trade headlines and all these high-level financial discussions. But if you look at their actual economic growth,
It's practically flatlining.
right, we are talking about a mere 1 to 2%. So welcome to today's deep dive, where we are going to unpack this massive disconnect for you.
Yeah.
Because you have this incredible hype and visibility on one side, and then completely stagnant domestic growth on the other.
Well, it is a paradox, right? And it
Yeah.
really forces us to rethink how we measure economic success in real time. Because, I mean, we have this hardwired assumption that when a country becomes the focal point of global trade networks, its domestic economy just naturally catches fire.
Like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing.
Exactly. But what we are seeing in Azerbaijan challenges that core assumption completely. The surface level buzz is just, it's completely disconnected from the macroeconomic reality on the ground.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to look right at that reality.
Mhm.
When you dig into the domestic indicators, the engine isn't just running cold. It looks like it is actively sputtering.
Yeah, the numbers are surprising.
They really are. For instance, the physical movement of goods, which is usually, the lifeblood of an emerging economy, is actually falling. Trade volumes are dropping sharply in some sectors. And on top of that, remittances are flat.
Right.
So it's not like expats are suddenly wiring huge paychecks back home to fuel local retail spending, right?
Right.
Usually when a country is getting this much buzz, it means their economy is booming. Why the massive disconnect between the hype and the actual growth numbers?
Well, it means the traditional drivers of a boom simply are not there. I mean, if citizens aren't flush with cash from abroad, they aren't buying more groceries, they're not building new houses or launching small local businesses.
Yeah, the money just isn't circulating locally.
Exactly. The local purchasing power is just stagnant. So you have dropping trade volumes, flat remittances, and that baseline growth hovering barely above 1%.
It's like a restaurant that's constantly trending on social media, but when you look at the books, they're barely selling any food.
That's a great way to put it.
So if trade and remittances are stagnant, you might be looking at this and thinking, well, why does it feel like there is a gold rush happening in Baku?
Yeah.
Where is this illusion of a boom coming from?
To find the boom, you really have to stop looking at the ports and start looking at the payment system.
Oh, payment systems.
Yeah. While the physical movement of cargo might be struggling, the digital movement of capital is skyrocketing. The financial activity inside Azerbaijan is expanding at just a remarkable pace.
Oh, wow.
We are seeing massive spikes in general banking activity, cross-border payment processing, and just overall transaction volumes.
Wait, so they are acting like an international financial VPN, basically.
Right.
Like two parties want to do business, but perhaps can't connect directly through their traditional channels, so they route the transaction through Azerbaijan servers to make it happen.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it, actually. The capital is moving through the country rather than being invested in the country.
Yeah, I see.
The banks are managing currency exchanges, they're handling the financial logistics of rerouted trade and clearing payments. The activity is entirely digital and almost completely untethered from domestic production.
Wait, but if they are acting as this giant financial VPN and they're collecting transaction fees on billions of dollars in transit, shouldn't those fees alone move the GDP needle past 1 or 2%? Like, where's the fee money going?
Well, that is the catch with transit economics. The volume of money moving through the system is staggering, sure, but the margins, like the actual fees the banks capture, are fractional.
Oh, so they're just getting a tiny sliver of it.
Exactly. While banking revenues are undoubtedly up, those profits are largely retained within a very narrow financial sector. They don't cascade down to the broader economy.
Right.
I mean, a bank processing a $1 billion currency swap might make a really nice margin for its shareholders, but that doesn't create manufacturing jobs or stimulate the local agricultural sector,
Ah,
you know?
so the wealth is siloed. The banking sector is having a great year, but the average citizen doesn't see a dime of that transit capital. That makes sense of the numbers. But it brings up the next obvious question, which is why Azerbaijan?
Right. Why there?
Yeah. Why has the global financial plumbing suddenly decided to reroute itself through this specific neighborhood?
Geography is destiny here. If you look at a map, Azerbaijan is positioned precisely at the crossroads of several major economic and geopolitical fault lines.
Right, they're right in the middle of everything.
Exactly. You have Russia to the north, Europe to the west, Turkey to the south and west, and Iran to the south.
Which is a neighborhood with an incredibly complex dynamic, especially right now.
And that complexity is the driving force. I mean, following the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, the global system underwent rapid seismic shifts.
Right, because of all the sanctions and everything.
Exactly. We're talking about decades-old trade routes being severed by sanctions. Traditional borders became impassable or highly restricted, but global demand for energy, raw materials, and consumer goods didn't just vanish.
People still need to buy things.
They do. The global economy is incredibly resilient. When an artery is blocked, it builds a bypass.
So the map gets redrawn. And Azerbaijan just happens to sit right in the middle of the most viable bypass available.
Yes. They are the linchpin in what is now being called the Middle Corridor.
The Middle Corridor.
Right. This is a rapidly expanding strategic route connecting Asia to Europe. And its primary selling point to global markets right now is that it intentionally circumvents Russia.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, though. So just being geographically in the middle is enough to drive all this banking activity. Is the country basically acting like a giant financial toll booth for the rest of the world?
Yes, exactly. In today's global system, being a route can be just as crucial and powerful as being a destination.
I want to pause on the mechanics of that for a second because I understand the physical detour, like trucks and trains physically driving through Azerbaijan instead of Russia.
Yeah.
But how does the physical movement of cargo along this corridor cause such a disproportionate spike in digital banking?
Because modern logistics run on complex financial rails.
Okay.
When cargo avoids a traditional northern route, the financing backing that cargo must also avoid sanctioned or high-risk banking systems. If you are shipping goods from East Asia to Europe via the Middle Corridor, you need a whole new chain of letters of credit, insurance policies, temporary escrow accounts, and transit fees.
Oh, wow. And because the cargo is physically passing through the Caspian Sea and into Azerbaijan, local financial institutions are the ones perfectly positioned to underwrite and process those intermediary steps.
Precisely. They provide the neutral, functional financial infrastructure for the physical goods. I mean, this route is highly multimodal. Goods have to move from trains, onto ships, across the Caspian, and then back onto trains.
That sounds incredibly complicated.
It is, and every single time cargo changes hands or changes modes of transport, financial transactions occur, Azerbaijan is capturing the data and the capital flow of that friction.
It changes how we think about leverage, really. We usually measure a country's economic power by what it produces, right? Like the tech innovation, the manufacturing output, the agricultural yield.
The tangible things, yeah.
Yeah. But here, the product isn't a good or a service in the traditional sense. The product is the pathway itself.
The product is access. In a fractured global market, owning the pathway commands immense strategic power.
Right.
You don't have to be the factory making the goods, and you don't have to be the consumer buying them. If you control the only viable road between the two, your relevance on the world stage multiplies overnight.
It's a fascinating model, but it makes me wonder about the long-term viability. We're looking at a country acting as a global clearinghouse, processing all this wealth, but struggling to grow its own economy.
Which is the core issue, yes.
History gives us a roadmap for this kind of sudden visibility, right? We've seen other nations thrust into the spotlight as transit hubs. How did they handle the influx of attention and capital?
Well, the historical precedents are incredibly varied, which proves that visibility does not automatically equal prosperity. It really all comes down to internal structural management.
Okay, give us an example.
A great point of comparison is Georgia, right next door. They experienced a similar surge in strategic visibility in the early 2000s, and they actually managed to convert it into tangible economic growth.
Really? What did Georgia do differently? Did they just tax the transit more heavily or something?
Yeah, it wasn't just about taxation. It was about structural reform. They used the momentum and the sudden influx of foreign interests to aggressively deregulate their economy, tackle corruption, and just make it incredibly easy to start a local business.
Oh, so they made themselves attractive beyond just being a route.
Exactly. They didn't just let the capital pass through. They created an environment that encouraged foreign entities to actually set up shop locally.
Okay, so they built a bucket to catch the water rather than just acting as a pipe.
That's a perfect analogy.
And if Georgia's a good example of capturing some of that wealth, the United Arab Emirates is the gold standard, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's dig into the UAE example because that seems like the holy grail for any country in Azerbaijan's position.
Hmm.
How did Dubai or Abu Dhabi actually capture that transit wealth? What is the specific mechanism there?
The UAE recognized early on that being just a transit hub is vulnerable. To mitigate that, they built an ecosystem specifically designed to make capital stay.
Right.
The mechanism involved creating highly specialized free trade zones, allowing 100% foreign ownership of businesses long before others in the region did, and crucially establishing independent legal and financial frameworks.
Oh, like the Dubai International Financial Center.
Yes. They set up financial jurisdictions based on English common law, which gave global investors the predictability and security they demanded.
So they felt safe leaving their money there.
Exactly. They didn't just process transactions, they built the physical and legal infrastructure that made multinational corporations want to base their regional headquarters there. They transformed from a transit point into a final destination for capital.
And then they took the revenues from those initiatives and poured them into diversification, right? Like tourism, real estate, aviation.
Yeah, they built an empire out of it.
They built an entire gravity well that pulls money in and keeps it circulating locally. But then we have the third comparison, which is Kazakhstan.
Right. Kazakhstan is perhaps the most cautionary tale here. They saw a massive increase in geopolitical attention and foreign capital inflows, largely driven by their vast natural resources and their strategic location.
Yep.
But the fundamental structure of their economy remained stubbornly rigid. The growth was moderate at best, and it certainly didn't transform the domestic landscape the way the UAE's strategy did.
Wait, why did Kazakhstan stall out? If they had the resources and the location, what went wrong?
They suffered from a classic case of resource dependence, often called the Dutch disease.
The Dutch disease.
Yeah. When an economy is so overwhelmingly focused on exporting one thing, usually oil and gas, the massive revenues from that single sector tend to artificially inflate the local currency.
Oh, I see.
And this makes other domestic industries, like manufacturing or agriculture, completely uncompetitive on the global market.
So the oil sector just crowds out everything else. And because the government gets all its revenue from energy, it has very little incentive to do the hard, complex work of building a diversified private sector.
Precisely. The result is a highly unbalanced economy. And unfortunately, when we analyze Azerbaijan's current trajectory, they are mirroring Kazakhstan much closer than the UAE or even Georgia.
That makes total sense, given that Azerbaijan is incredibly reliant on oil and gas exports too. So when this new wave of transit capital flows in from the middle corridor, there isn't a robust, diversified local market waiting to absorb it.
Exactly. The structural hurdles are immense. Their private sector outside of the energy industry is relatively narrow. In a healthy, diversified economy, we look for a strong multiplier effect.
Okay, walk us through how that multiplier effect is supposed to work versus what is actually happening in Baku right now.
Sure. In theory, if a dollar of foreign capital enters a market, it gets invested in a local tech firm or a logistics company, right?
Right.
That company uses the dollar to hire a local developer or a warehouse worker. That worker then spends their paycheck at a neighborhood restaurant, and the restaurant owner uses that money to buy produce from a local farmer.
It bounces around the economy.
Yes. The initial dollar multiplies its impact, generating several dollars worth of economic activity.
It sounds like water flowing through a pipe. A lot of water is rushing through, but the pipe itself isn't absorbing any of it to grow.
So what does this all mean for Azerbaijan's future? Why can't they capture that wealth like the UAE did?
Because in Azerbaijan, that chain is broken. The local business environment isn't expansive enough to catch that initial dollar. It just slips right through.
Exactly. The money enters the banking system, a marginal fee is extracted, and the capital exits on the other side toward Europe or Asia.
Wow.
It doesn't spark a domestic manufacturing boom, it doesn't fund local startups, and it doesn't create a new wealthy middle class. The capital remains quarantined within the financial sector.
Which perfectly explains the paradox we started with. The banking servers are melting down with activity, but the GDP growth is stuck at 1% because the money is just passing through the digital wires.
Right.
They are processing the transaction, but they are entirely divorced from the value creation of the goods being traded.
It really requires us to make a crucial distinction between two different types of global positioning. What we are witnessing is Azerbaijan evolving into a critical node in the global system rather than a driver of
A
it?
node, like a router on the internet of global finance.
Oh, that's good.
It directs the traffic. It is essential for the network to function, but it isn't generating the data itself.
That analogy holds up perfectly. A driver is a market that generates immense demand, like the United States, or produces immense supply, like China.
Right.
A node is the pathway that connects them. The 1 to 2% domestic growth proves that Azerbaijan is not an economic driver. But in today's fractured, heavily sanctioned global environment, being a vital node offers a totally different kind of geopolitical leverage.
It is the leverage of indispensability. If you are the only functioning toll booth on the middle corridor, the major trading blocs suddenly care very deeply about your internal stability, the security of your borders, and the reliability of your banking regulations.
Oh, they're forced to care. You have become integral to their supply chains and their economic survival. Even if your own domestic economy is stagnant, your strategic value to the rest of the world is peaking.
This completely changes how we should consume financial news. I mean, when you open the Wall Street Journal and see a headline about banking activity surging in a specific emerging market, the immediate instinct is to assume a local economic miracle is underway.
Right, but a more sophisticated reading of those indicators is required.
Yeah.
You have to separate the sheer volume of transactions from the creation of actual localized value. A spike in banking activity might just mean the global financial plumbing has been rerouted through their basement.
You really have to ask, are they building a destination or are they just operating a bypass? Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought to mull over for you listening. We've established that Azerbaijan's newfound relevance, this massive surge in banking activity and its status as the linchpin of the Middle Corridor, is primarily driven by an immediate, desperate need to bypass sanctioned neighbors.
Right. A map was redrawn by conflict, creating a temporary necessity.
So what happens to a corridor economy when the geopolitical weather changes?
That is the big question.
If global relations eventually normalize, or if sanctions are lifted in 5 or 10 years, the traditional northern routes might open back up. What happens when the world decides it no longer needs the detour? If your entire strategic relevance is based on being the necessary bypass, can you survive when the main highway reopens?
That is the inherent vulnerability of being a node. I mean, you are entirely dependent on the traffic continuing to flow your way.
Exactly.
If the traffic reroutes again and you haven't used that window of opportunity to diversify your domestic economy, the visibility vanishes just as quickly as it arrived.
It is a stark reminder to always look past the hype. You see the headlines, you see the massive transaction volumes, and you assume the engine is running red hot. But until you look at the fundamental realities, whether a country is actually building a self-sustaining economy or just collecting a fractional fee on someone else's trade, you don't really know what kind of growth you are looking at. Keep a close eye on the middle corridor. The money is certainly moving, but the real test is whether any of it ever stops.